welcome to our VAP Training Center webinar, Managing and Engaging Teams Remotely. I'm Blake Cush, I'm the Director of Training and Outreach at OVS. So we've said this before, and we want to reiterate that we definitely understand that a lot of programs are under unique forms of stress during this time, and today's webinar is another in our Resilience webinar series, which was developed with the goal of helping you tackle many of these pressing issues. Full list of the upcoming trainings in the Resilience webinar series is on your screen. The last couple that we have coming up, one more on Thursday and one the following week. In addition, all of these trainings, including the previous ones that we've had in the series, are available on our ovs.ny.gov/training website. There you can actually access links to previously recorded ones, including today's, which will be published once we get it uploaded there. It typically takes about a day or so to get everything recorded, exported, and uploaded. So if you can take advantage of those, there's some really great content out there, and we encourage you to check it out and share with your colleagues. We'd also like to remind you that we're offering free increased access to our consultants from the OVS Training and Technical Assistance Request Program, or TARP, through individual and small group coaching sessions. Our consultants happen to be today's webinar presenters as well, Jenny and Alan, whom I'm going to introduce to you shortly, and they'll talk a little more about this throughout it as well. Again, all of these resources and free trainings are available on that same training webpage. You can access them there for you. So as soon as you exit today's webinar, you'll be directed to an evaluation survey on the presentation. Please take a couple minutes, give us your feedback. You also have an opportunity to notify us if you're interested in receiving more follow-up and on this topic and some other variety of training topics. I have to reiterate that these evaluations really do help us improve the presentations that we offer in the future. It's super helpful for Jenny and Alan. It's super helpful for us to make sure that what we offer to you guys is dynamic. It's something worthy of your time, and we really do want you to take just a couple minutes, no more than 3 or 4 minutes to complete the evaluations. You'll be automatically redirected. So again, please take a few minutes to do that. So today's webinar is again led by Jennifer Amstutz of JA Strategies and Alan Krieger of Krieger Solutions. Jenny and Alan have more than 40 years of combined experience in consulting and training, working with nonprofits and agencies around the state of New York, and have also served as executive directors of nonprofit organizations. And both also have master's degrees in management. That said, I'd like to formally welcome Jenny and Alan to today's webinar.
Thanks, Blake, and good afternoon, everyone. If this is not your first webinar with us, then you will know that we like to make sure everyone is familiar with the WebEx controls for the chat box. So we're going to have a couple of opportunities during the webinar for you to share your ideas and experiences with your colleagues, and we'll use the chat feature to do that. We're also going to use the chat feature to submit questions and comments, and we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So I want you to just take a look at this screen if you're new to WebEx. And if you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a menu pop up at the bottom. And in the center of the menu is an icon with a round bubble inside. That's a chat box. If it's gray, click it. In the slide here, you can see that it's blue, and that means it's already open. Then if you look at the right side of your screen, you should now see your open chat box. And at the top of the chat box is a drop-down menu that lets you send a message to specific people. If you have questions or comments for us, please send them to all panelists and not the host and presenter, because we're not going to be we each monitor it at a different time, and if you send it to all panelists, it'll make sure that we see it. There are going to be a couple of times during the webinar when we ask you to share your thoughts with everybody, and at that point, please change it in the box to register all participants. So right now, just make sure that your chat box is open and set to all panelists, and you should be ready if you have a question. We'll go on to the next slide. This is our third webinar in our series about remote work, and today we're talking about managing your team while in a remote environment. And so we're starting with a couple quotes because I really like this quote from Henry Ford. I think it's especially relevant right now. The quote is, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success." And our teams may all be in a new phase right now. We're, for the most part, no longer working together in the same place. We're beginning again by finding a way to come together. And now we need to ensure that we're both keeping together and then working together so that the entire team can be successful. And as this Japanese proverb points out, we are much stronger when we're all working together. So let's start by reviewing our objectives for the session today. Today we're talking about remote teams, but many of the concepts are not new ones. And if you took our webinar back in 2018, you may see some concepts and ideas that are familiar. Because ultimately, we're exploring strategies that will help us achieve team success, regardless of whether we're in person or remote. And today we're going to start with that. We're going to understand what the elements are of team success. Then we're going to talk briefly about the stages of team development and about establishing or reestablishing team norms. We'll look at ways that we can best use technology to help our teams work better together. We're going to share ideas that will help strengthen and build teams so that they are closer knit, even if they are physically separated. And finally, we're going to end with some ways to start planning for the future. So let's start the webinar by talking a little bit about the words group and team. Sometimes people may use those two words interchangeably, but groups and teams are really two different things. The definition of a group is a number of people who are located close together or are classed together. Often people are brought together to work in groups. Before, when we were in the same workspace, and now when we're in the same virtual workspace, we may be working as groups, but not all groups are teams. So let's answer the question, what makes a group of people a team? We've identified 6 key elements that effective teams share. As we review this list, I want you to think about the teams in your organization or in your program and see how well those teams measure up and what key pieces might still be missing for your teams. Effective teams have a shared sense of mission and vision. They're clear about why they exist and what they're hoping to accomplish. During times of crisis like these we're in right now, making sure the team is still connected to the mission and vision is vitally important. We touched on it when we did our managing staff webinar a couple of weeks ago, but it does bear repeating here. Teams also have clearly defined roles and responsibilities that are interdependent. They need each other. They need the other team members to do their parts in order to succeed. And more than that, they also share a sense of mutual accountability. Each team member is responsible to the others on the team. Each is accountable for effectively completing work, and without that, the team can't succeed. And even though the team might be physically separated now, an effective team will still feel this interdependence and mutual accountability. There also needs to be a shared understanding of leadership. And while there's usually a designated leader for every team, effective teams understand that each team member has a role to play in helping lead the team to high performance. Our 4th key element is that the team has to have clear goals and objectives. Goals are what the team broadly hopes to accomplish to help address their mission and vision, and objectives are more specific and measurable. It's what the team hopes will result from their investment of time and resources. These results should move them closer to their vision. Because the team environment has changed so much so quickly, the team may need to revisit and revise these goals and objectives, but they still need to keep them in mind as they do their work. And then along with goals and objectives, effective teams have a clear understanding, clearly understood and implemented evaluation process to provide real-time feedback on how well they're doing. Another key element is having clear and shared norms for effective interaction, and those too might need to be re-examined right now. Alan's going to review this in just a minute. And finally, if the first 5 key elements are in place, the team is likely to gain the last one, feelings of belonging and commitment. People are happy to be part of the team and are willing to invest their time and effort for team success. If any of these elements are weak or missing, the team will not be fully effective. Many of these may be in place, but they may not be fully shared with all team members, or they may have been in place but have slipped a little since the crisis began. This is where leadership communication comes in. It's critical for the leader to be in close communication with the team and to share each of these elements and be sure everyone is on the same page with them. These 6 elements can serve as a checklist for you right now. If your team is missing any, that's the first place you want to focus. So now I want you to start by thinking a little bit about your own team, and we're going to use a poll to do that. And we're going to give you an opportunity to think about your team in 2 different ways. First, I want you to think about your team before the COVID crisis. How well did you work together then? And how many of the elements that we just talked about were in place? And then I want you to choose one of the following answers for your team. Either did your team work well together with high trust and effectiveness? Did your team work pretty well together, but maybe there was some friction or lack of shared objectives? Maybe your team was more of a group than a team, and you didn't work very well together, and there was a lack of collaboration. Or finally, maybe your team just had a lot of conflict, and you weren't really a team at all. So once you answer that question for your team right now, I want you to think about, or for your team during the COVID crisis, before the COVID crisis, I want you to think about, like, answer that question again for your team right now. And think about it. Is your team in the same place now as it was a month and a half ago, 2 months ago? Or are they in a different place? So answer the question both ways. We're going to give you a little less than a minute to do that. You'll see the poll pop up hopefully on the right, and you can click right there. Now I know it says in the upper right-hand corner that you have a time limit of 2 minutes to fill it in. I'm just going to give you about 10 more seconds. So if you can finish your answers, we're going to close the poll when it gets to a minute.
It's closing right now, Jenny. Just an FYI, it takes about 15 seconds for.
Yeah, I know it takes a while, so I appreciate that.
No
so
problem.
In a second, we're going to see the results of the poll pop up on the right, and we'll get a sense of, well, we won't be able to see how individual people answered. We'll be able to see if there's much of a change between how solid teams were before the crisis and how solid teams are now. So if you see there, it looks like people felt like their teams were a little bit. We had a few more people, 6 more people, who thought their team was working really well together before the crisis, and 40 people then, and only 34 people saw them working well together. Now the numbers are pretty consistent for working fairly well together, but there is a slightly more that are working fairly well together than they did before the crisis. But most team, not very many of you answered that you didn't work well or had a lot of conflict. So that's a good sign. So people felt like their teams were working pretty well. They may have shifted a little from A to B. So now I'm going to turn it over. Alan, do you have any other observations on the poll before we start talking about team development and what may get us to some of these places?
No, it was great to see that everybody who answered pretty much was on A and B. Either the teams worked well or worked fairly well. So that's a good sign, and that it didn't diminish during the crisis now. One thing we will be talking about is that even if it didn't diminish now, you have to be careful about what we do on reentry, but we'll get to that in just a little while. Okay, one important concept we want to talk about to help you understand the role of a team leader is the stages of team growth. And teams go through 4 basic developmental stages, and it's not a one-way trip. Teams can go forward and backwards on this path, and they can even be working on 2 or 3 stages at the same time. I'm going to give a quick overview of the model and then go into more depth on the next slide. The first stage is forming. This is where team members come together and decide individually and as a group whether they want to work together as a team or remain as a group of individuals, perhaps as a team in name only. Forming involves each person exploring and then committing to the team's mission and goals and feeling comfortable with the other team members and the team leader. The team leader has important roles to play in this stage. The second stage is storming, and this is where team members sort out who is really in charge and who they want to align with. If this isn't handled well, people will align in small cliques, and this will result in friction and frequent conflict. The leader's role here is facilitation. When storming is handled well, it results in the establishment of team norms. These are the rules or guidelines that help team members work together effectively and collaboratively. This third stage, norming, is where you formalize and solidify the guidelines you developed for working together. Once these 3 stages are successfully completed, the team moves into performing. In this stage, team members are committed and empowered. They individually and collectively own the team's mission, goals, and norms. And together, they work to make sure the team and each of its members are successful. Those of you who indicated on the poll that your team is doing very well would say, for the most part, your team was in the performing stage. And while most of you have continued to say your teams are doing well, for some people, shifting to remote has been a challenge. And again, if it's not a challenge for you, we'll be talking about moving from remote back into reentry, and that can cause some challenges. So that if your team is at some point is no longer working as well as it can, or some of the things we're going to talk about in a little while will help you inoculate your team so it continues to work well through all the transitions. Understand that people are impacted differently by the remote crisis and from when they were working at work. And I've been coaching, as Blake mentioned, a number of different folks whose teams have not survived the transition as well as yours have. So that understand that people have different kind of stresses and different pressures on them. And so that you may have to reform your team. You may have to get back to recommit, have everybody recommit to being an active member of the team. In previous webinars, we also talked about ways to help support individual members of your team, and that's an important role of team leaders, and we'll mention a few of them again here today. Whenever new members join a team, the whole team steps back briefly into forming, and some of the folks I've been talking to actually hired people just before the shutdown, and a few actually hired people as the shutdown had just begun. So those folks have teams that really have to reform remotely without getting to see each other in person, and that makes it very stressful. So anytime you have a team member leave and new folks come on, the team has to stop and think about, is this the team I want to be on? Do I like these new people? Am I okay that people have left? Where does that leave me? And it's usually not a huge conversation, but it's important that a leader take the time to have that discussion. The second stage of team development, storming, is most likely reduced in this time of crisis because people are not working as closely together. There's fewer interactions and fewer opportunities for conflict. However, when conflicts do come up in a remote environment, it's more difficult to resolve them. And even if conflicts are temporarily reduced, as we begin to move more to an in-person workplace, storming is likely going to arise as people try to sort out their changing role, their influence, and their authority in a new situation. And storming is not a bad stage. It's not something to be avoided. It's a necessary stage that teams go through periodically to sort out issues of authority and autonomy. The key is to use these conflicts as a way to identify early any issues that arise between team members and to proactively develop strategies and norms for effective teamwork in this new and changing environment. The team's leader's role in storming is to facilitate discussions and problem solving to help bring the team together and move them through storming into norming and then on to performing. The important step in norming is codifying and formalizing the norms that develop through the storming conversations. And here's some information about team norms. Norms address a wide range of topics that guide how individual team members work together. Many norms won't change from our previous work environment to the new one, but there are some that will need to be adjusted and some new ones that need to be developed. Norms related to attendance and punctuality are somewhat different on a Zoom call than an in-person meeting. Issues such as how we collaborate and work together, and even possibly what we collaborate and work together on, may be different now. So take a minute and stop and think about what might be some different guidelines or ground rules that would help a team working remotely be more effective. How are they different than they were before? Many of them are the same, but some have changed. Norms should be behavioral and specific so that everyone understands exactly what they mean. For example, a common ground rule will say is treat everybody with respect, but that's subject to a wide range of interpretation. Whereas listening without interrupting is much more specific and clear. So take a moment and jot down some norms that might be different now. Norms related to authority, communication, decision-making, setting boundaries. How has your team changed the way they interact, and how might that require or have evolved new norms? So when you've listed a few for yourself, see if you can write one or two in the chat box. You please set the chat to all panelists. You don't have an all participant option. And we'll try to read them out, and then we'll copy and send them out to you in an email after the webinar. So we'd like you to share your ideas. And this is also something that we will be discussing in our group follow-up sessions, which are a new feature we'll be talking about at the end of the webinar. Okay, so if you have your all panelists, you want to start typing in, we'll share a few things. We have weekly communication as opposed on the fly, so formalizing your communication, talking about response time on emails, something we've talked about in previous webinars. And then somebody has ending meetings 10 minutes early because most have back-to-back Zoom meetings. So yeah, when we schedule meetings now, we go 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and we don't give ourselves the break we normally did from walking from one meeting to another. And give yourself some breathing room. Zoom meeting versus in-person can be frustrating. So maybe we need some rules about how we can talk on a Zoom meeting effectively. Using email and video conferencing more often since we can't walk over to the same desk. And email is sometimes problematic because messages aren't clear. So another strain on Teams. When someone is talking, please don't interrupt. Let them speak and then say your part. Also, it's okay to tell someone when they are taking too much talking space. Okay, can't turn around and just talk to a coworker. Need to schedule time. It's flex hours, not 9 to 5. Okay, so if you want to continue to type in, we're going to move on, but we'll collect these and share them. That's a really good list. And thank you all for your share there. We'll have one more time for you to do that later in the webinar. I want to talk about the elements of successful teams. Jenny spoke earlier about some of the key elements that makes a group a team, such as mission, goals, and roles, etc. For a team to be successful once it's formed, there are some additional elements that need to be in place. Team members, as part of the forming stage, need to come to value and trust each other, and to listen with an open mind to each other's ideas and suggestions. Also, as part of forming, besides a team having a mission and goals, each member has to come to understand and become committed to the team's mission and goals, and it's important that everyone understand that in the same way. The team leader's job here is to facilitate discussions around this to ensure that there's a common understanding and buy-in. Once these two steps are taken, it becomes easier for people to take pride in being part of the team and to develop a deeper sense of ownership regarding the team's mission, goals, and services. When your team is fully re-engaged and everyone is on board, it's important to revise your procedures for effective team functioning in this remote environment. And you'll have to further revise them as you eventually move into some hybrid form of in-person environment. Then, as the team leader, it's important to stay in touch and to stay aware of how each team member and the team overall is functioning, so you can quickly identify and eliminate any roadblocks that come up. You want to continually work on revising and creating new norms to help your team have continued success.
But in addition to what Alan just shared about each team member's role in contributing to a successful team, team leaders also serve a critical role. They empower the team members so that they are able to build trust and interdependence between the team members. They also motivate the team. The leader provides structure necessary and helps guide so that the team can be successful and accomplish their work. A leader provides opportunities for the team to interact and opportunities for the team to develop new ideas and processes. And finally, a leader ensures there's an opportunity for high-quality communication, both for the team as a whole and also between each and every team member. These roles and strategies are consistent for leaders at any time, but I want to highlight just a few for you to think about when you're leading remote staff. During times like these, trust is especially important. So think a little bit about what you're doing to empower, build trust, and motivate. In our earlier webinars, we've already spoken about the importance of checking in and keeping contact, and we're going to touch on meetings in a minute. But there is a difference between maintaining contact, being seen and being heard, and micromanaging. So try and make that difference. Maintain your contact, but don't micromanage. By the same account, as a leader, you can give staff the parameters on how you want work to be accomplished, but leave some room for flexibility and let them get the job done in a way that works for them. Build trust by communicating with transparency and honesty. We've touched on this also in earlier webinars. Your team is most likely feeling unsettled, and keeping them in the loop with as much information as possible can help. Empower your staff by allowing them to be flexible with how they schedule their time as long as they're meeting their outcomes. And finally, acknowledge that the hard work and accomplishment of the team is important. This will help motivate them to continue to produce good work. Using your team meetings effectively is a way to structure and guide to let the team get its work accomplished. And it's also a way to facilitate interactions. We've spent some time in other webinars touching on the importance of check-ins and team meetings, as I said, but we did want to spend a little bit more time here talking about effective meetings. First, many of us are trying to pack too much into each meeting that we have. We're trying to have it do too many things. And what results is we often have really long meetings and we're not getting much accomplished. Instead, I want everybody to think a little bit about the purpose of each meeting before setting it. Here we've created a chart of 4 different types of meetings. These are based on Patrick Lencioni's 4 types of meeting from his book, The Advantage. The first type of meeting is the quick check-in. Some teams are currently doing these daily, and some others of you are maybe only doing these once or twice a week, but they are really important. These are super short opportunities to share basic administrative information for the day that everyone should know, important meetings and priorities and announcements. If we were all working in the same location, we might consider these standing meetings where everybody just stands in a huddle. And remotely, we should try and think of them the same way, even if you're doing them by video or by phone call. The second meeting is your regular team meeting. Your team might want to hold these meetings once per week or once every other week. We have them listed here as weekly. These are meetings where you can share your client updates and help to work together to overcome any roadblocks or problems that the team is encountering. The third type of meeting will be held less often and on an ad hoc basis. These periodic strategic meetings are when you can come together to brainstorm and collaborate on your goals and objectives. The strategic meetings should have a specific topic, and they're going to last an hour or two to give you enough time to get that topic covered. In crisis situations like now, we're probably not scheduling these meetings as often as we were before, but they really are as important, maybe even more important than they were. So now is a good time to perhaps schedule one of these strategic meetings with your team. They're a good way to get your team working together. Maybe your topic can be stepping back and rethinking how you pivot from your old outreach strategies to new ones, or maybe what part of your program delivery model you might want to change when you return to the workplace and face-to-face engagement. But get your team working together to create some solutions for the future. The final type of meeting is the team retreat. This is something that you want to do periodically. Quarterly is ideal, but at least twice per year. And you should set aside enough time to get some real work accomplished. These meetings should be planned with specific outcomes. Maybe you're going to be doing some learning that needs to happen around a specific topic, or maybe you'll be setting your team's strategic goals for the year. The inclination is to cancel retreats during times like these when we can't all come together in one location. But planning and long-term thinking is still important to keep the team moving forward. Regardless of the type of meeting you have scheduled, there are some strategies that will make sure that at the time that you have set aside for remote meetings is as productive as possible. First, make sure you have a clear purpose for your meeting. If it's simply a check-in meeting, then the team leader or whoever is facilitating the meeting should keep everyone to quick updates. If it's a strategic meeting, make sure everyone knows the strategic topic of the meeting and what the proposed outcome will be by the end. Second, except for those quick check-in meetings, always use an agenda and send it out in advance so that everyone can come to the meeting prepared to discuss the agenda topic. One strategy that can help generate ideas and solutions during a meeting is, instead of designing your agenda around a topic, you can design the agenda around a question. So if your topic for the meeting was going to be outreach, the agenda could be designed around answering this question: how can we reach out to new clients using non-traditional methods? By giving people a question, it will give them an opportunity to come to the meeting with ideas that will answer the question. Once the meeting is underway, the team leader or meeting leader's role should be to facilitate dialogue. The agenda should include timeframes, and the meeting facilitator should keep everyone to those timeframes. A team leader, especially if that person is a supervisor, can steer the direction of a conversation because of their influence. So if you are the team leader, it's a good idea to speak last once everyone has had a chance to contribute. During the meeting, make sure you summarize what you've heard and take some notes. And then after the meeting, follow up in writing with the major decisions or actions that were decided on, so everyone has a record and so that the discussions don't need to be repeated in the future for those team members who weren't present. In addition to effective meetings, you also want to make sure your meetings are inclusive. You can have a very efficient meeting in which major decisions are made and outcomes are decided upon, but in which only a few team members have actually participated. And this can happen more often when everyone's not in the same room. So let's review a few strategies to make sure your team meetings are inclusive. First, try and make your remote meetings less remote. While we're all getting more used to virtual meetings by now, they still can be awkward and impersonal. So one thing that you can do if you're a team leader or meeting host is get to your meeting a little bit early and on the video conference and greet people as they pop on your screen. Try and encourage your attendees to join by video if possible so that they have the feeling of being together. But make sure you actually give people warning on this and ask them to be in person by video on the agenda so that they have time to prepare. Yeah, other ways to create warmth is to look directly into the camera, make eye contact, and remember to smile because we are all looking everybody at the face. Second is set some ground rules. These meeting ground rules are mini norms for your meetings. And Alan's already discussed the importance of norms for your team. And many of these norms you set will transfer into the meeting setting. And some of the suggestions, the great suggestions that people put in the chat boxes will be terrific meeting norms. But you may want to set some ground rules that are very specific to your remote meetings. There are some functions that you can use, such as the raised hand function in some of the meeting platforms so that people can raise their hand instead of interrupting a speaker, or you can set guidelines on when and how you use the chat box. One great way to get more involvement from everybody on the team is to rotate who's facilitating the meetings and creating the meeting topic or learning opportunities. This will help build leadership skills within your team members, and it will give you, as team leader, a break from doing all the talking and leading. Make sure you're encouraging participation from everyone present. Use people's names and invite them to participate, especially if you can see on video that they might have something to say. You can also do something structured to invite everyone to participate. And if you're having a large team meeting and using a platform like Zoom or GoToMeeting that supports breakout rooms, you can use those to facilitate small group discussions that will get everybody involved. The third and fourth role of a team leader is to facilitate interaction and ensure effective communication. And one way to do this is to use your technology most effectively. I know that most teams have already done a lot of thinking about the technology they're using, but it can't hurt to take a step back and review your entire package. You may already be using Zoom or Team or Hangouts to host your video meetings, but you might also want to consider an instant messaging platform. There are lots of them available. I work with people who use Slack in their organizations, and others use Zoom. And Microsoft Teams, which is part of the Office 365 suite, just became free until January of 2021. Each of these offer you the opportunity to use instant message chat feature that you can keep open on your desktop. This can help the team feel more connected and might help team interaction. These instant messaging apps are also great for quick questions and thoughts. However, we all know that instant messaging can be distracting and it shouldn't replace other interactions. Make sure, therefore, that you have the right mix of technology. In addition to instant messaging and virtual meetings, what other technology might facilitate collaboration within your organization? There might be ways to incorporate new technology to facilitate your data collection, share your documents, or even host informal team get-togethers. And maybe there's a project management software out there like Microsoft Teams that can help you get organized. Just because you're using one method now doesn't mean that there might not be something out there that will work better. And then, so make sure you're using the right technology for the task at hand. Email might not be the best technology for something that is time sensitive. Maybe you need to use instant messaging or my favorite old-fashioned technology, a phone call, which we seem to be leaving behind with all of this new stuff. Instant messaging is probably not the best technology for complex thoughts or important issues, though, even if it's the quickest. You might want to think about a meeting or an email for that. Finally, take advantage of some of the add-ons that many of the remote meeting platforms offer. If you've taken more than one webinar with me and Alan, you will know that Alan and I love to use polls to get input from the group we're working with. And if you have a large team or are doing a large staff meeting, a poll can be a really great way to get feedback from the group, and it might be a way to engage team members who are less likely to speak up in a large meeting. So explore other features like that might be available and give them a try. And so now that I have mentioned polls, there is one last poll that we want to quickly do with you, and it's related to one of my most favorite topics. It's going to pop up on your screen right now. And the question is, what is the best way to eat a slice of pizza? You have 6 choices. I'm going to only give you a chance to choose one, and I'm really only going to give you 20 seconds to make your decision. So we're going to close this poll. Well, maybe I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, Blake, if you can close the poll, we'll give a minute to see what the results are.
15 more seconds and it'll be.
I know.
Yep.
Maybe
and I'm sad you didn't include ranch dressing with this. This is.
Oh, wow.
Travesty.
I can't even consider that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Isn't that awful? Okay.
All right, here they go.
These are folded in half. It's a tie between really almost folded in half and holding it from the corners. So I'm sorry to see that so many of you are wrong. I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is. I'll let Alan tell you what the right answer is.
Well, we hope you had a little fun with the poll. And many years ago, when I had a friend at SUNY Albany, I wasn't from this area, we came and we had pizza, and he ate it with a knife and fork, which I had never seen before. From downstate, which is, I think, where the best pizza is, and we always did it folded in half. But anyway.
And there are 9 brave people here who also admitted to doing the same thing.
Yes. These are true local people eating with a knife and fork. Anyway, that's what I understood Albany pizza to be. So it's the least messy way to eat pizza for sure, but I think it's less fun. So anyway, we hope you had some fun with that. And that's an example of some of the things you can do with polls in meetings just to have fun. They don't have to always be serious. They don't have to be content, but just get things to get people to share ideas. And especially now in this disconnected experience of not having casual contact with each other, a poll can be a way to bring that together. So we need a variety of team building experiences, not just when the teams first start, but throughout a team's existence, and especially in this time of remote engagement. So there are a number of strategies you can use to continue to build your team in addition to fun and funny group sharing. Training can be a team building experience when everyone participates in the same activity. Working remotely in the midst of a crisis makes it challenging to focus on your team's development. But learning doesn't have to stop in this new environment. You just have to find new ways to adapt. For example, as Jenny said, sometimes meetings should be really short, and it may be more practical to use micro-learning techniques to help people easily digest new information. Focus on sharing short lessons in a 5 or 10-minute session. It can cover a specific tool, a behavior, or a skill. Make these lessons available to the whole team and let people identify their own areas for training. Also, a webinar is a very intense learning experience. The information is presented in a very condensed way. So scheduling a team meeting shortly after a webinar is a way to debrief what was learned and brainstorm ways you can put into place these ideas on your team. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering some facilitated group follow-up sessions following this webinar. If you participate, it may give you some additional ideas to use with your team. Another strategy is that if one team member participates in a webinar or other training experience, they can bring that back to the group with a brief summary of the key points they learned. This could be part of your weekly check-in meetings. Reinforcing a culture of learning will keep your team engaged and growing while they're working from home. Also, as Blake mentioned in the beginning, Jenny and I are available to provide training to your team on a wide range of topics. A number of team leaders I've spoken with have strongly endorsed fun team-building activities as a way to keep their team strong and engaged. This can range from playing charades together, sharing collages of team members on Denim Day, having a fun question of the day, or having happy hours after work. Another great team-building strategy is to have small projects for team members to work on together. This could include updating your manuals, exploring new ways to better engage your clients, or other performance improvement activities that 2 or 3 team members can work on collaboratively. Besides producing new strategies for your team, it's another way for team members to maintain engagement while working remotely. You can also ask team members to work together informally as peer coaches to help solve problems that come up and provide each other support. There are many team building strategies out there, and it's important to consciously use them to keep your team strong and engaged. Oops, forgot to advance that. There's that slide. Okay, so we'd like to again use the chat box real quickly to have you share some team building activities or team building strategies that are working for your team. Again, we'll read out just a couple, but we'll make sure to copy them and share them with everybody on the webinar today. If you have the polling up in front of you, you can hit the little X in the upper corner to close the poll so you can see your chat. Okay, the number of comments about pizza up there. Okay, bi-monthly Zoom check-in meetings. Humble brag Friday. That sounds interesting. Icebreaker questions at the beginning of meetings. Coworkers send email chains of images of their kids and pets and refer to them as their coworkers and make jokes that coworkers are sleeping on the clock. A coffee hour on Friday mornings, a book club, morning emails to check in. Okay, lots of good ideas. Again, please keep sending them in and we'll copy and paste them so we can share them with everybody after the webinar is over. And we're getting to the end here. There's one more point I want to cover today, and that's the importance of planning. And here's a couple of really good quotes. If you do not know where you're going, every road will get you nowhere. That's by Henry Kissinger. And then without a plan, even the most brilliant business can get lost. You need to have goals, create milestones, and have a strategy in place to set yourself up for success. That's by Kate Taylor, the writer. And so when we think about planning, we've talked most of this webinar about living in the moment, building your team, maintaining the crisis, dealing with things right now. But we want to look beyond the crisis to what's coming next. Nobody's really sure what that is, but we want to begin to try to come up with a plan. During a crisis, especially like this that's very unknown, people feel powerless, and that can be debilitating, both for your individuals and for the team as a whole. While there's not much we can do in terms of the virus, other than following the rules for caution and keeping ourselves healthy, there is much we can do in terms of how we engage with our work and how we serve our clients during this crisis. Most of you have sorted that out by now, and you operate effectively, both safely and with success. And it's important to also begin looking to the future. How will you continue to operate in the current environment as it slowly evolves back to some form of person-to-person interaction? Your team will continue to go through the forming, storming, and norming stages as the environment changes. Strong teams can work through these quickly and constructively. And engaging in planning activities will help your team continue to stay engaged and give them confidence that you're helping them become ready for the future. It also helps stabilize their sense of the present as the new normal. It's not a short-term crisis. As you begin to plan, it's helpful to use as touchstones your mission, your vision, and your core values. Beginning with those, ask your team how you can best move forward from where you are to continue to serve your clients in a safe and effective way. You want to engage all levels of your team in planning. Make sure that senior leadership is on board with where you're going, and check with each team member to make sure they feel comfortable with what the team is developing. This concludes our webinar, and Jenny will tell you about our new webinar follow-up groups I've been mentioning, and then we'll have time for your questions. So be sure when you leave to complete the evaluation. We really appreciate your feedback. So we'll stay on, and again, if people can use the chat box to start typing in some questions while Jenny wraps us up.
Thanks, Alan. And I do want to, there were a couple of questions that were before the pizza quiz, and I did grab those. So you don't necessarily need to retype them in, but you can if you want. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about something new that we're trying, as both Alan and Blake alluded to earlier. We're going to try it. We're going to try it this week and see how it goes. These have been we've had really great attendance at these webinars. And I know that everybody, Alan and I both know that everybody has a lot of great ideas and may benefit from sharing with one another. So we've scheduled 2 follow-up group discussions. one on Wednesday, tomorrow afternoon at 2, and one on Friday morning. And this is an opportunity for a small group. We're going to limit the group probably to around 10 people to join in a Zoom and in the Zoom format to share ideas, discuss some of the content, but maybe, just brainstorm with each other and bounce the ideas off of each other about what's working well for managing your team and things you might want help with. Alan or I will be there to facilitate their groups, but really they're an opportunity for your peers from throughout the Victim Assistance Program network to use each other's expertise as well. There is a link in Calendly to do that. So you can see it right here. It's calendly.com with the OVS TTARP and then webinar discussion. You can also get there from the other Calendly link that was there earlier. And then we talked about it at the beginning of the webinar, but don't forget to check out the OVS Training Center website if you want more information about the group and individual coaching or about the Training and Technical Assistance Program. One thing that you can do to help build your team is either Alan or I are available to come in and do some team workshops remotely with your team or work with your team leaders on team building skills. So that can be part of that Training and Technical Assistance Request Program. So check it out if there's anything that you think you might want to work on with your group. So we are going to continue now with your questions. So if it says the link is not working. It will be working.
Copy and paste. I think that's what's going on.
Okay. So we will get the link to work. Did I maybe copy it in wrong? I will double check that it's in the Calendly right, but it should be working in the next 10 minutes. By 2:10 the link will be working. So write it down.
And I will make right now. I just checked.
Okay, great. Yep. The link is working now. So while we're doing that, if you can put any questions that you have in the chat box, and to all panelists, that would be useful. And in the meantime, there was a couple of questions earlier. The first one I saw was about using the polls and anonymity. And when you answer a poll on WebEx and on Zoom, you don't see who answers the poll which way. So it is a good way to get anonymous feedback from the group if you want to do that. So I didn't get to see which 9 people voted for, knife and fork eating with the pizza. But so it's a really good way to get anonymous feedback from your group if you're looking for that. And then somebody asked about using shadowing, as a way to, I think with the question we just said, what about shadowing? And I know that for a lot of groups, a lot of organizations use shadowing as a way to train new employees. And so thinking about ways that you can use Zoom to shadow is another way that you can think about building your teams, having each team member shadow each other for a little bit during the day. It's not in person, but because of the video function, it may be something that works well.
And somebody said the link says that training starts at 3, and the follow-up group starts at 3, and we said it starts at 2.
Okay. It will. If you sign up for it, it will be at 2, and it will switch.
We appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're supposed to be here on the webinar, not checking out.
But I appreciate you signing up. We will. Yeah. And if we have a lot of people sign up, we will. If we will be able to we'll open other times. So if we're trying to limit the size of the group, but if those fill up, we will add additional times. Somebody said they were trying to sign up before there was no more space, and we appreciate the enthusiasm. Does anybody have any questions? We will hang around at least until for the next 5 minutes or so for questions about the content on the webinar.
Well, I imagine we'll have a little bit of an exodus where people are going to take off. So I just want to thank you formally, Ginny and Alan, for putting together today's webinar. You guys don't forget to do your evaluations when you do exit. Take advantage of these free resources that we keep talking about. Ginny and Alan and the Training and Technical Assistance Request Program is completely free to all OVS funded programs. You just have to submit an application for it. So again, in challenging times like this, there's plenty of resources out there that we've tried to make available for you guys, and we're thinking on our feet. And if you have some time, check it all out and take advantage of it. Also, check the webpage, OVS training webpage for the next webinars. We have one on Thursday on creating trauma-informed environments for children, and then Ginny and Alan are joining us again the following week after. So if you do want to step off or take off from today's webinar, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Otherwise, we will stick around and do a few more Q&A.
There's a question, do we come in person? Will we do the training after this pandemic is done? Yes, we definitely come in person. I'm not sure when the pandemic will be done that we would feel safe traveling and coming into small spaces. So if you have a large training room and we can keep our distancing, I don't think the pandemic will be done for a long time, but it may be a point where people feel it's safe to stay in large distances. I've been working with another client to come up with a training, and we talked about ways of doing it once we have 6-foot spacing allowed. And frankly, I think Zoom is better because you don't have to be 6 feet apart and shout to each other. So, but yeah, short answer is yes, we'll be happy to come in person. The contract is good till 2021, and I certainly hope it will be safe to do that by then.
Right, and before all this, we were coming out and doing, we've traveled all over the state to do training and consulting with organizations, and we, when it is safe to do so, we love to, come to you and see the programs and the staff in person. And I have fixed, the Calendly has been fixed, so it should now say 2 o'clock.
Is it full?
I don't think it's full. Let's see. I don't think it's full yet. I will let you know.
Some great recommendations for keeping things lighthearted. I love the water cooler talk, scheduling just time to be informal and have some, what are you watching on Netflix sort of discussions. Those are great. A lot of happy hour lunches or check-ins, which are fun.
Yeah, somebody else used the time to share something that was difficult for you and help understand why people may act the way they do considering their past experiences. So again, keeping it light, keeping it fun is important, but people are going through stressful times, and having times to share some of the distress as well as the good stuff can really bring a team together in terms of being supportive. Okay, if there are any other questions, we'd be happy to take them. We'll give it another minute or so.
Somebody else was sad that there was no ranch dressing offering in the pizza.
No, I am really sorry. It's not terrible when we were designing it. I'm not a big ranch dressing fan myself, and so I probably just blocked it from, I would eat my pizza in any of the other ways. It just never would have occurred to me. So is that an upstate New York thing? Ranch dressing? Anybody from the city who eats ranch dressing on there?
Probably.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank you all for your time and attention and contributions. We'll be trying to capture a lot of the chat ideas and sharing them out, and hope we see some of you in our follow-up discussion groups or coaching down the line. And please fill out the evaluation on your way out.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Have a wonderful day. Be safe.
Thanks. Thank you.